All we've got to do now is to start pumping.
So I really wasn't planning on recording today, but my God, the NFL, the news bucket that was dumped on our heads over the last couple of days gave me just no choice. So we've got a loaded show here. We're going to be talking about Russell Wilson. We're going to talk about Calvin Ridley, Aaron Rodgers, all big headlines in the NFL world. On top of that, we've got a lot of franchise tags, some big players getting re-signed. We're going to hit on a lot of it here in the show. Please do hit that like button if you are watching this on YouTube. Would really help me out. Also, if you are listening to this episode of the Fully Inflated Football Podcast on your audio platforms, I would also really appreciate it if you could take a second to leave a nice review. There's really no easy way to grow your podcast. It's not like YouTube where it pushes videos out to people. You really have to climb the ranks in the podcast world, so to speak. So it would really help me out if you're waiting in line at Chipotle or taking a dump, waiting on your coffee, whatever it may be. If you could just take out your phone, take a couple minutes to leave a review, it would help me out more than you know. So thank you in advance for that. And let's get into the show, man. Let's start at the top with the Russell Wilson trade. Holy buckets, man. This just, it came right on top of the Aaron Rodgers news, and it came out of like nowhere for me. I mean, I was wrong. I've been on this channel saying like, there's no way the Seahawks trade Russell Wilson. It would just be so stupid for them. They have a 70-year-old coach. He's the only reason they're any good. They're in a conference that they can be a playoff team next year with Russell Wilson. And they did it. And I can't really explain why. I don't know what happened. It could have been that Russell behind the scenes was kind of forcing his way out. He's voiced some displeasure. I don't think that was the case. I just genuinely think that Denver kept poking Seattle. And the fact that Russ isn't super happy and they haven't won a lot of football games over the last couple of years, I think that was enough for Seattle to just cave in and say yes. That's really the way I see it, and that's a huge mistake for Seattle, in my opinion. Essentially standing by Pete Carroll, and I love John Schneider, I really do, but to stand by those two compared to Russell Wilson, it's just I think it's fair to be critical of the decision to trade Russell Wilson. Now, I'm going to circle back to Seattle in just a second and talk about what this means for them. I'm going to get on a positive note for a second and talk about the Denver Broncos, who pulled it off, man. I was stunned by this move, like I said. And those that have been following the Fix Your Team series, the offseason blueprints of this podcast, for the Denver Broncos, I said, yeah, you're going to try to get these quarterbacks, but I don't think it's going to happen. I was very confident Aaron Rodgers is not going to be going anywhere. I did not think Seattle would trade Russell Wilson. And then I suggested maybe Deshaun Watson as a possible option for them, but he's got his complicated legal situation. So I was talking about the Broncos like, what do? They're going to miss out on a quarterback, and they didn't. They got their guy, and there's a reason this was such an attractive spot for a quarterback. You have just a plethora of receiving options. Cortland Sutton's a stud. You got Tim Patrick, very underrated, big body, third perimeter receiver. You have Jerry Jeudy. You had Noah Fant. He was a part of this trade package. You've got a good offensive line. They need to find a right tackle, but a run game as well with Javonte Williams. Like, this is really a dream surrounding core for a quarterback. And there's rumors that Russ actually was like saying, I won't waive my trade clause unless it's Denver. Also, who knows the truth to that? NFL reporting is at like an all-time low right now. It feels like half of the reports that come out just straight up aren't true. So who knows what to trust these days, but this is an attractive spot because you get a quarterback like Russell Wilson into that offense. You are a Super Bowl contending team. Now, I think they still have some work to do. I think it's not insignificant that they traded Shelby Harris on the defense, as one of their best starters and a leader on that defense. And you traded Noah Fant, who was a part of the appeal for this offense. So you're going to need, hopefully, Albert Okwuegbunam can step up at tight end there. I think he's more than capable of doing that. but you're going to need that to happen. And then defensively, they still have a lot of work to do. I think they have a lot of money in free agency to spend. I think after getting Russ, they have like $25 million to work with, and they could probably move some money around and get even more. But you really have to figure out your edge opposite of Bradley Chubb. You really need another interior defensive lineman now that you traded away Shelby Harris. All of their linebackers are impending free agents. I don't know if you want to count on the Ohio State kid that they drafted in the 3rd round last year. Name's escaping me. Showed some flashes, but I don't know if you want to count at him to be your number one, because they got Alexander Johnson and I believe Josie Jewell, also impending free agents. And then in the secondary, you've got Surtain is great. You feel pretty good about Ronald Darby as your other corner, but your third corner and your second safety are also huge spots that need to be filled. So those are definitely areas that they're going to attack in free agency, and I do believe they're going to be an attractive spot. You know, there's a world where they can sign maybe a Riley Reif at right tackle. They can maybe re-sign. Now that they got the quarterback, maybe they go and just re-sign Bryce Callahan, who's a great slot corner. Maybe they can attract Bobby Wagner over here, get Von Miller back, and God, I don't know how much money they'd have after that, but what if they can go and get like Justin Reed or Tyrann Mathieu? Like, that's 5 free agent signings. I think they could make it work. That would be a dream for the Denver Broncos to fill out the remaining holes on this team. And then it's like, okay, you're not just Super Bowl contenders. You're one of the 3 or 4 best teams in the NFL heading into next season. So you're just ecstatic for Denver. They still have some work to do. Like I said, they gave up some pretty big pieces in this trade. I thought they gave up maybe a little bit less than I would have anticipated. I was expecting 3 firsts, 2 seconds, and either 2 more players and or picks. You could count Noah Fant as like a first round value. He's probably more of like a second round value. But yeah, I mean, they gave up a lot for him, but it's worth it. And any fan, I don't know if there's any Denver fans saying this, but every time I do one of these quarterback trade mocks on one of my videos, you always get fans that are like, you can't give up that much for a quarterback. How can you mortgage the future? Just no. Like, look at the Rams. Case in point, like you need to get a quarterback that level, especially when you're in the AFC with just in your division. You've got Herbert, you've got Mahomes. The Raiders are no joke. You have in your conference Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, the defending AFC champs, the Cincinnati Bengals. Like, you need a top 10 quarterback to compete in the AFC with any level of confidence. So giving up what they gave up is a no-brainer for Denver. It's closer to a steal for Denver than it is overpaying, I would say that. So it's good feels all around for Denver. I don't have a single bad word to say about this trade. As for Seattle, like I said, I don't get it. I don't see how you justify this in your organization. The players obviously upset. You've got guys like Poona Ford and Richard Sherman calling out the team, not on the team anymore, obviously, but I think there was another player that was like, sheesh. But, you know, you're demoralizing the locker room. You're eliminating your chances really to compete next year. It's kind of strange that they went and got Shelby Harris because he's up there in age. Like, that tells you that they're still going to be trying to win, which it's just, other than if they trade for Deshaun Watson, it's just not going to happen. Like, Drew Lock's your quarterback. Your defense is a disaster. I know you picked up another first-round pick and a second-rounder, but you're not fixing this defense overnight. Pete Carroll is the game is past Pete Carroll by. I do believe that. It's just a gross feeling for Seattle. I'm trying to be positive here. Like, I'm trying to play devil's advocate. In theory, you've got DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Noah Fant, a play-action-heavy Shanahan-style offense, which is a very appealing surrounding situation for a quarterback with arm talent and deep ball ability. Drew Lock kind of has shown that he's not that guy, but in theory, he has those traits. Maybe it is a guy like Malik Willis or a Matt Corral or a Sam Howell. But the thing is, I feel like they're just going to trade Tyler Lockett is kind of the vibe right now. They might trade DK Metcalf. I just swapped out the Metcalf jersey, and I apologize that I put the TFG jersey curse on you, Seahawks fans, because I bought the Metcalf jersey in, I think, August, and wow, it's been a disaster since that happened. The Niners seem to be safe of the Kittle curse at this point. But yeah, it's just kind of like, why? What are we doing here if you're Seattle? And I have one last note about Seattle that, the picks look pretty good. Like, in theory, you have some more resources to maybe rebuild this thing. I do think the Pete Carroll situation just complicates that because of his age. If you're going rebuild here, why keep Pete Carroll around? But, and I get it. Like, they have Sean Desai. They're kind of passing the torch there. It's not the worst strategy in the world. It's just weird. But the Seahawks get all these picks, right? The chunk of this trade was 2 first-rounders and 2 second-rounders. And if you're going to trade Russell Wilson for a bunch of picks, the Seahawks have to hit on those picks, right? Otherwise, this is going to look even worse. And you're going to be a laughingstock, and everyone's going to lose their jobs. So the Seahawks need to take a real extended look in the mirror at how the hell they have been the worst drafting team in the NFL with first and second round picks, or at least top 50 picks since 2012. And they're very comparable to all of the jokes we made about John Gruden and the Raiders in that they kind of beat to their own drum. They have prospects that fit their criteria, but are by most considered reaches. But Pete Carroll and these guys justify their culture and say, no, he'll fit here. We need to take him now. And they just kind of ignore the concept of draft value, consensus rankings, and manipulating the draft to get the most out of it. They've gotten the bare minimum out of the draft really since that incredible 2012 draft where they got Wagner and Sherman. I think the year before, well, it was 2012, 2011. They created the Legion of Boom basically through the draft, a couple free agents, but it's been a complete opposite since then. And they went from probably the most well-regarded front office at that time, 2013, 2014, to they're at the bottom now, man. They're right down there right now in my mind with the Panthers and the Dolphins. They're at the bottom of the barrel right now as far as front office operations. And I like John Schneider. I think he's a good scout, but he has a lot of proving to do with these draft picks with Pete Carroll. To prove my point here, since 2012, here are all of the Seahawks' top 50 draft picks. All of them, not leaving anybody out. Top 50 picks since 2012. Paul Richardson, Jaron Reed, Malik McDowell, Marquise Blair, Darrell Taylor, Jermaine Ifedi, Rashad Penny, LJ Collier, and Jordan Brooks. Jordan Brooks is the best player on that list. Looks like a pretty good player. He plays the least valuable position on the defense. That's a embarrassing list for the Seahawks, and that has to change now that you just got these picks for Russell Wilson. It's got to change yesterday, and they have to take a look in the mirror and say, are we overdrafting character? Are we overvaluing certain positions? Is it a coaching issue? Is it a scheme issue? They have got to figure out why out of 1, 2, 3, my eyesight's failing me right now. I think that's 9 players I just listed. Over the last 8 years, they've traded away a lot of picks. And they've picked in the back half of the second round. But everyone, top 50 is generally where you find star talent in the draft. Generally speaking, they say the top 50 picks are where the money is. And after that, there's a huge drop-off. So you got to hit on not just starters, because some of these guys started, right? Jerron Reed, Darrell Taylor looks like he's maybe a starter. Rashad Penny, when healthy, has shown some flashes this year, but God, that's a bust at this point. It's been 4 years to get to this point. Jordan Brooks, a starter at an unvaluable position, not even a star. You've got to find star talent with those picks at impactful positions, and they haven't done any of that. So they have got to start doing that if you're the Seattle Seahawks, or it's going to be like a full-on blow-up, not just with personnel, but I think John Schneider is going to have to probably lose his job if he can't hit on these picks and turn this thing around within the next couple of years. There's a third team that was really heavily impacted by this Russell Wilson trade that I need to talk about, and that's the Las Vegas Raiders. Before this trade, I thought it was kind of a no-brainer to extend Derek Carr if you're the Raiders, and I still think they do. But God, like, don't we all know where this is going if you extend Derek Carr? Couldn't it be like any less obvious? Like, at best, you're going to have to dominate outside of your division and sneak in as a 7 seed. You have to play the Seahawks, the Russell Wilson-led. Russell's been carrying the Seahawks so long that I now just picture like the Broncos have become the Seahawks because they got Russ. But you got to beat the Russell Wilson Broncos twice. You got to beat the Justin Herbert Chargers, who are going to load up in free agency twice. And you got to beat the Chiefs. Well, you don't have to beat them, but you have to play them, the Chiefs, twice. Like, you have to play those guys 6 times. That's likely 5 automatic losses on your schedule, if not 6. So that means you have to be pretty much perfect outside of your division just to be a wild card team. Russ is going to be there for at least 3 years. Herbert and Mahomes obviously aren't going anywhere. Where is this going to go with Derek Carr? If you're the Raiders, if you're Josh McDaniels and you think you can get the job security, you've got to trade Derek Carr. Otherwise, you're just going to end up getting fired anyway, because you're not going to be winning enough games. I think the Raiders built some really nice stuff last year. I think McDaniels fits really well with Derek Carr, but to a certain level, it's like, can you get 2 first-round picks for Derek Carr to send him to a desperate Washington team or a desperate Steelers team in a terrible draft class? 2 teams that are really eager to win? I think, yeah, you probably could. Stafford got 2 firsts last year, and there were a lot more quarterbacks available in the draft and all that stuff. Derek Carr is not as good as Stafford, but I think value-wise, he's not that far off. He's a little bit younger. You can get 2 first-round picks for Derek Carr. I think you got to do it. And the beauty of that is it potentially means you're going to be the worst team in the NFL next year. And then you can take Bryce Young. That's just 1 year of sacrifice. And you're in the mix with picks and an actually potentially elite quarterback. I think this changes things for the Raiders. They won't do it. They'll pay Derek Carr because teams are scared and all that stuff. But I do think it'd be the right thing to do would be to trade Derek Carr. Okay, let's talk about Aaron Rodgers for a little bit. And the contract so he's coming back to Green Bay. Kind of what I've been saying on this channel is it just all the tea leaves were pointing towards that. It really wasn't a huge surprise. But all the narrative was about the contract details that came out. I alluded to NFL reporting just kind of not being very accurate these days. Rodgers ends up having to clarify that the details that came out of him getting a 4-year extension for $200 million was not true. And when that came out, everybody's like, oh my God, Aaron Rodgers, how selfish. You have to be Tom Brady. You're 39 years old. You have to take a discount. You have to help your team win. Just telling Aaron Rodgers what he has to do with his money. And it just amazes me the lengths people go to like hate on Aaron Rodgers. Like, you want to hate on him for the vaccine stuff, fine. You want to hate on him for, his kind of cryptic offseason last year. I think that's stupid. I think there's a lot of things going on in Green Bay that Aaron Rodgers leveraged his power as a player to improve things in Green Bay. If Aaron Rodgers doesn't speak up about signing veterans, who knows if they sign DeAndre Campbell and Rasul Douglas? Who knows if they do this stuff to push the can down the road and try and win a championship here with Aaron Rodgers? Like, the Packers haven't used the franchise tag since 2010. They avoid free agency. Like, I think Aaron Rodgers had some really good points. Like, if I'm going to stick around here, we got to fix some stuff. We got to update our organizational philosophy to be competitive with teams like the Rams and the Broncos and all these teams that are, and the Bucks and teams that are doing what they can to try and win a championship. So if you want to be critical of Aaron Rodgers for not throwing really, he was quiet about it. He handled it behind scenes. He handled it like a man and had man-to-man conversations with Gutekunst and LaFleur, and they've made real changes, and they've all become friends for it. Like, that's a cool story. That's not a negative on Aaron Rodgers, in my opinion. But, Aaron Rodgers is the only quarterback, the only back-to-back MVP that could ever, get paid as such. He's the best player in the NFL. He's back-to-back MVP. You're going to have to pay that player, right? He's the only player in the NFL that is going to be called selfish for taking the money he's worth. Is Patrick Mahomes selfish? Is Josh Allen selfish? Is Dak Prescott selfish? I saw a report that Matthew Stafford could get up to $45 million. Wow, so selfish. Like, everyone's, as a fan, I get it. Like, yeah, you want Aaron Rodgers to do what Tom Brady did and play for $25 million. But you can't expect that out of anybody. Like, if I'm in Aaron Rodgers' shoes, like, you want me to take $25 million less to slightly improve our championship odds? Like, if I'm Aaron Rodgers, like, we were the Super Bowl favorites last year. Like, I know I can play better, but hey, let's not have our special teams implode. Let's not have our entire offensive roster get injured next year, and we can still definitely win a championship with me making $50 million. Like, it's just crazy the lengths people go to attack Aaron Rodgers. I saw a tweet from somebody. I was really close to calling this person out because it's just so fucking stupid. He was like, of course Aaron Rodgers waited to clarify his contract details until after the Russell Wilson news came out. The dude just can't go a second without a headline being all about himself. That was like the first time Aaron Rodgers tweeted or said anything publicly about anything since the season ended. Like, oh, he's such an attention diva. No, like, everybody is just, all right, I'm going to drop it. You guys get the point at this point. Everybody hates Aaron Rodgers. They're going to look for everything to hate about him. To me, this is a really cool story. I mentioned the the way he handled his disagreements with the organization. I think it's cool that they've reached a point where, they're moving on from Jordan Love. This is an organization that Rodgers said he wants to retire with. He wants to play into his 40s. Instead, the organization drafted his replacement. So he's proved the organization wrong. He's worked with these people. He's developed good relationships with guys like Gutekunst and LaFleur. And now you're beginning a new refreshing era in Green Bay. It's post the Jordan Love pick. I'll talk about if he gets traded. It's post COVID and all the vaccination drama. It's post all the relationship issues. It's just, that's in the rearview mirror now. This team can focus. They know where their future lies for the next few years. We'll see what the length ends up being on the contract, by the way. Whatever happens, they're going to end up clearing cap space by his extension, by the way. But that's why they had to give him an extension, if you don't understand that. His cap hit was $45 million, so they have to create a new contract where they can front load it and create void years on it so that they can get under the cap. His cap number is going to go from 45 mil to probably like 23 or 24 mil this year. So yeah, you're creating a new era in Green Bay. There's clarity. I think it's a really something that should be celebrated instead of just going straight to like, oh my God, the back-to-back MVP is so selfish because he wants to be the highest paid player in the NFL. Like, no shit. Like, sorry he's not Tom Brady. Y'all want him to be Tom Brady? That's fine. But just don't expect that out of any quarterback. We're very closely tied to Tom Brady right now, so it's recent. But as Mahomes' career goes on, Josh Allen's career goes on, don't expect these guys to just take bargains to build these super teams all the time. Like, I'm never going to fault a guy for taking an extra $20 million. Like, it's just, that narrative is just insane to me. Let's talk about Jordan Love for a second. I think Green Bay still believes in Jordan Love. He obviously hasn't shown what you would hope he's shown, would have shown to this point. I certainly still believe in Jordan Love. I was a big Love guy coming out. But obviously his value has dropped off a little bit. And I don't know where the NFL views him. A lot of NFL teams obviously just weren't very high on him because he fell to the back end of the first round. I think Green Bay, if you can get a top 50 pick or so for Jordan Love, I think you just take it. You count your losses. It's pretty close to a first round pick. It's what you spent on Jordan Love. If it is a 4-year extension for Aaron Rodgers, you're never going to see Jordan Love play. So I think you don't have to trade him, but it just makes sense to trade him and just kind of cut your losses. My favorite saying that I say it every few months is what's the first rule in the game of holes? Stop digging. If you're stuck in a hole, stop digging. And right now, the Jordan Love situation is a little bit of a hole for Green Bay. I think it could be an awesome opportunity for somebody else. He would be by far the number one quarterback for me in this draft class. Again, I was higher on Jordan Love, but just looking at my grade on Love coming out, he would have been, I think, like a 6.55 grade, which is in that boom or bust category. The highest grade I have on a quarterback right now is Kenny Pickett at a 6.35, which is someone who's likely to become a starter within the first 2 years. And even then, it's like the upside's not crazy. I think he's a much better prospect than Malik Willis. Now, you've seen a couple games from him. You haven't seen what you like to see, but you also have to factor in he spent 2 years in development under Aaron Rodgers, which is like a huge benefit. So to me, trading, if you're Washington or Pittsburgh, trading a second-round pick, New Orleans, Tampa Bay, trading a second-round pick or even a back end of the first for Jordan Love, I would personally do it. Now, I don't know if other teams are going to do that. So if Green Bay can't get a top 50 pick for Jordan Love, I think you sit on him. Keep him as a quality backup that's been in your system. If anything did happen to Aaron Rodgers, you have a guy that you hope can ascend to be a starting caliber guy for you, and you have this great roster. Hopefully they can, keep everything back, maybe add another receiver and go on that deep playoff run, Nick Foles style. But I don't think they just sell Jordan Love because they have to. They don't really clear a lot of cap space by trading him. It's really about getting a good pick for him. Otherwise, you keep the backup there. So we'll see what happens with Jordan Love. I think it's 50-50. I think if a team's willing to pay the price that Green Bay is asking for him, that he'll get traded. I think with this quarterback class, I think he'd be smart. He's only 23 years old, by the way. He'd be, let's see, he's younger than Malik Willis. He's younger than Pickett. I think Ritter's 22. Howell's 21. Corral's 23, so he's the same age as Corral. And Carson Strong, I think, is 22. So he's like the same age as all these quarterbacks. Love was really young coming out. All right, let's talk about Calvin Ridley. Wow. I was probably more surprised by the public reaction about the Calvin Ridley suspension than I was about the Russell Wilson trade, which, as I said, I was really surprised by the Russell Wilson trade. I was really surprised to see so many people like defending Calvin Ridley and saying this suspension is too much. And like a lot of people that I really respect. And I'm not like, this is obviously an opinionated topic, so I'm not like an expert on the situation, but I have my own opinions on it. And that's it. The rules are the rules. And when it comes to gambling in sports, this is like an integrity of the league issue. Everyone keeps saying you got to protect the shield, and I agree. Like, if you don't snip this in the butt now and make an example of Calvin Ridley, as gambling's becoming more popular, you just can't have anybody talking about your league that it's even a remote possibility that the players are gambling in it. And people are like criticizing the league for working with, I think it was FanDuel, to set up a program that can like catch players if players are gambling. They're calling the league hypocrites because they're promoting gambling and all this stuff. Like, no, you can't have coaches, players, anybody connected to the team gambling on the game. It's basically insider trading. When I worked for the Timberwolves selling season tickets, I signed a contract that said if I gamble on an NBA game, I'm fired. And you know what I didn't do? I didn't gamble on an NBA game because it's just not worth the risk. And every NFL player knows that. So whether Calvin Ridley's going through mental health problems or not, obviously you want to be sensitive of that, but you still can't do it. So the outcry and like people saying, "Oh, Ridley didn't do anything." Yes, he did. He broke a very serious rule. Now, the one thing I do understand is everyone being like, "How is this so much more of a suspension than domestic violence?" And yeah, absolutely, like 100%. Domestic violence should at least be at this level, if not more. I will say, maybe I'm just an optimist. I will say it's been a little while since we had a real like issue where a man was guilty of sexual assault on a woman. You had like the Tyreek situation with the kid, but he got off innocent on that one. Kamara's under a situation right now, but he got into a fight with a man at a bar. I'm not excusing violence in any situation. I'm just saying I feel like it's been, Kareem Hunt was the last one, and he effectively was suspended for a year because the Chiefs cut him and nobody picked him up. So I think the NFL looked a little bit at that and was like, you kind of served your 1 year suspension. Ray Rice was like, that's the last one where it's like 2 games for that. Now, he never got back in the league, but that was a long time ago. I like to think that if it happens the next time it happens, I like to think that the league will give the guy a year. Because I agree. I think if you're a piece of shit and you beat up a defenseless woman and you're a, 1% athlete in the world, you should at least be suspended a year. Like, I agree with that idea that being outraged about this being so much more than domestic violence, but I don't think that Calvin Ridley should get less because of that. No, you can't have players gambling on games. I don't care if he's been away from the team for a couple weeks. I don't care. You can't have it. I totally agree with the suspension. Calvin Ridley should know better. And that's my stance on it. I was surprised so many people defending Calvin Ridley or saying that players, I saw so many people saying players should be allowed to bet on games. Really? That's your take? I was surprised that people think that. You can't have that. You can't open up that can of worms. The risk reward for letting that happen is risk up here, reward way down here. These guys are paid handsomely to play in the NFL. There's no reason these guys should be betting on games. They shouldn't even be thinking about betting on games. Whoa. All right. Let's talk about some player moves here, and then we're going to wrap up. We got about 10 mailbag questions, and we'll be on our way. So Mike Williams has signed a 3-year, $60 million contract extension with the LA Chargers. I think it's a solid contract, a little bit more than I would have liked to pay him. I think he's more of a $15 million player. You're kind of, nickel and diming quite literally there. I think Williams has a chance to play up to this contract. You look at what he did in the first 8 games. His chemistry with Herbert, the back shoulders, the ability with Herbert with his elite ball placement to just put it where Williams can go get it. I think he has a chance to kind of continue growing here with Herbert to pay back that value. Think of like the chemistry that like Rodgers and Adams have, Burrow and Chase have. I think Williams, just as far as like the back shoulder, the timing routes and stuff, because when you're a guy like, well, I'm not going to say Chase and Adams aren't separator types, but those guys are just, they're very good at the timing stuff with their quarterbacks. And I think Mike Williams can develop that with Herbert and pay back that contract. In my Fix Your Team AFC West edition, I had the Chargers paying Mike Williams because I said, yeah, technically like Allen Robinson would be a little bit of an upgrade. You'd love to try and go get Chris Godwin. Well, I said you can't guarantee you get those guys. You might as well take a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush or whatever it is. And sure enough, Chris Godwin gets tagged. Unless they signed Allen Robinson, Mike Williams was going to be the best they could do. So I think it was a good re-signing. Sure, it's a little bit more than you hope, but I don't think it's going to make a huge difference. Making $20 million as opposed to $15 million. The Tennessee Titans gave Harold Landry a I think it was an $87 million 5-year contract. Very fascinating deal there. Just the length is interesting to me. To get 5 years at that price point for Harold Landry was just interesting. I don't think it was good or bad. Just for the Titans to commit that long to him, for Landry to take... It's good money, but it's not like elite edge money for 5 years. It was an interesting contract, I think, but that was a good deal for me. I think Harold Landry is an excellent number 2 rusher. It's a little bit expensive for a number 2 guy, but he's produced at a really high level. He's a double-digit sack guy, gets a ton of pressures. I'll shout out Andre Weingarten. He pointed out that I think it was 60% of his pressures last year were non-one-on-one. So you're basically talking about schemed up pressures or unblocked pressures. So on one hand, it's like, yes, he's not this dominant one-on-one pass rusher. He's very good at that. But I think there is something to be said about how the Titans scheme works, where you have these pocket pushers all around. You've got Jeffrey Simmons. You've got Danico Autry was a nice ad for them. You've got Bud Dupree. I think there's something to be said about Harold Landry's bend, his get off, and ability to wrap around and clean stuff up. He does have some unique ability in that way. So I think I'm not going to be critical of this contract. I think both Williams and Landry were players I would have tried to retain if I was those teams, and they paid them what they needed to pay them to keep them. You're paying good players. You're paying good players at valuable positions, wide receiver and edge. It's like tiny bit more than I'd like, but for the most part, good contracts, in my opinion. And then we have a pretty hefty list of franchise tags, some more surprising than others. The most surprising to me was Cam Robinson for the Jaguars. So the Jags have been the favorite to take Evan Neal in the first round. He's an offensive tackle out of Alabama. I have been saying, though, that the Jags tackle situation is far from a disaster, especially when Cam Robinson was there. So you have Cam Robinson, who is now going to be on the second year on the franchise tag. And he's kind of like the perfect example of a player of why the franchise tag exists. He's a player that's kind of developed every year. He's a good player, but he's not someone that you really want to commit to long term if you don't have to, until he can prove that he is worth it. And he hasn't proved that he's worth a long-term contract yet. One more year like he had last year, I think he would be. But he's also paid like handsomely to come back here. He's paid the average of the top 5 players at his position, and he's not even close to a top 5 tackle. So like in Cam Robinson case, he's making more money than he would on the open market. And it helps the Jags like keep a player that they think is valuable for them to keep for next year. So you bring him back at left tackle, and he's going to start there. And then they have 2 options at right tackle. They have Taylor. I always forget Taylor's first name. Is it Jawan Taylor? Or is that the Houston guy? Yeah, Jawan Taylor out of Florida. They have him, and they have Walker Little, who I loved that pick last year. For all of the Urban Meyer hate, I thought that was a freaking awesome pick. I thought Walker Little was very much a sleeper last year, and he got on the field late and started to look the part. He was a guy that at one point in time was viewed as a top 10 potential pick, but his career got derailed with injuries and COVID and stuff. But he just kind of hit the ground running as soon as he got back on the field. So, like, you've got 3 starting caliber tackles, and I think all 3 of them have very good traits. And with that competition there, you could continue to see development there. So, like, Evan Neal's a stud. He's the highest rated player on my board right now. It's why I mocked him there pre-Cam Robinson franchise tag. But I think it's a lock at this point that they're not going offensive tackle. It seems very likely they're going to take Aiden Hutchinson with the number 1 pick and get some building blocks for that defense with Josh Allen and Hutchinson up front, and then probably focus back on the offense in free agency and later in the draft. So that was a big swing of events. It seemed very likely they were going to let Cam Robinson go, but he's back, and that changes the draft a lot, I think. So that was a big surprise. And then Orlando Brown caught the franchise tag for the Chiefs. It was not a surprise. I talked about them in my offseason blueprints that you're probably either keeping Orlando Brown or Tyrann Mathieu. And I said Orlando Brown was the guy you kind of have to keep because their tackle situation after him is a disaster. And Orlando Brown's been like very vocal. Like he wants to be paid like a top end left tackle. And I just don't think he is this elite left tackle, but he's a very good left tackle. So I get why you don't want to let him go. And I get why they're hesitant to pay him a bunch of money. I think the Chiefs are handling this right. I think they need to see another year of Orlando Brown before they're like, we're going to pay you $20+ million, which is what he's going to want. So I think that was a good move for the Chiefs. The Bengals had to franchise tag Jesse Bates. Like, I don't know if Jesse Bates is holding out for like $25 million or something crazy, but it's a shock that they haven't worked out a contract yet. Paying Jesse Bates is the biggest no-brainer for the Bengals. Anything under $20 million, and I don't think you hesitate to pay Jesse Bates. And I don't get why Jesse Bates would want to leave either. So this one's head-scratching. It's possible that he's playing hardball and just he wants to hit the open market, and he wants to like reset the safety market, which is a little bit lower than other valuable positions. So maybe he's trying to leverage every ounce of power he has, but I was surprised that they haven't worked out a deal yet. I think this is comparable to Justin Simmons getting the franchise tag for the Broncos last year, where they're still working out details, but they couldn't risk him hitting free agency, so they had to put the tag on him. I still, to this point, would be very surprised if Jesse Bates doesn't get a long-term extension before the season starts. Sometimes the franchise tag is used as just a placeholder, so these guys can't hit free agency, and I think that's what that was. You had 3 tight ends getting the franchise tag: David Njoku, Dalton Schultz, and Mike Gesicki. I think these teams were terrified of the tight end market once Ian Thomas, who's garbage, got, a 3-year, $23 million contract from the Panthers, was it? Like over 6 a year? No, it was like 18, 19 million, but he got like over 6 a year. Might have been, no, it was 8 a year. It was like $23 million for Ian Thomas. I think these teams with David Njoku, Dalton Schultz, Mike Gesicki, who are all like starting caliber tight ends, were terrified of these guys hitting the markets and getting priced out. So I think those were all good uses of the tag. Schultz was a little bit surprising, but it makes sense that Dallas has been rumored to want to cut Amari Cooper and potentially DeMarcus Lawrence, because I think keeping Dalton Schultz is really smart. I think he's a great third down target for Dak Prescott. So he's probably going to be cheaper on the franchise tag than he would have been if he hit the open market. The tight end market has been very interesting the last couple of years. Started when like Austin Hooper got like over $10 million. I think Dalton Schultz is very similar to Austin Hooper. I think the franchise tag is like 9 or 10 million. So you're kind of getting Dalton Schultz and Gesicki on a budget. So those were smart moves. Njoku's interesting. He's not their starter, but they do love 12 personnel, and they hope he can take another step up next year. I don't hate the move. Chris Godwin got the franchise tag by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Not a big surprise either there. He's one of these players that he's too good, he's too valuable to just let him walk. They're in a weird transition. Who knows who their quarterback's going to be? Who knows what this team's going to look like? But I do know that Bruce Arians ain't here for a rebuild. And he knows, like, the value of Chris Godwin. So really not a surprise that they franchise tag him and they're just going to try to make it work. It does seem like Ryan Jensen is going to leave. I think Ollie Marpet retiring probably clarified some things. I don't know how much cap space that cleared for the Bucs. But, yeah, I mean, keeping Godwin's kind of a no-brainer if you can, and you're the Bucs. It is unfortunate for Godwin's second year in a row getting the franchise tag. He ended up tearing his ACL last year. You know, that's the big criticism of the franchise tag, is that it's only a 1-year deal. So if you do get like this big, like career injury setback, you're going to lose a lot of money off of it. I think Godwin will be just fine. ACL recoveries aren't too bad these days. So Godwin's probably a little disappointed. He probably wanted to hit the market, but he's still going to get paid handsomely. He's probably going to play well next year. We'll see what the quarterback situation looks like, but he'll be all right. He's still pretty young. And then Davante Adams got the franchise tag. This was basically they're waiting on the Aaron Rodgers domino. Then they're going to tag Adams because they need to buy a little bit of time to figure out his contract. You know, they got a lot of cap work to do, so these contracts, especially with like Rodgers and Adams, they're going to take a long time because they got to figure out void years, front loading, back loading this stuff, guarantees, cash, all this stuff is very complicated for Green Bay. Russ Ball's their cap guy. He's going to be very busy this next week. But no surprise that Adams got franchise tagged. Like I've been saying, you know, Rodgers is coming back, and Davante Adams was never going to become a free agent. He may have been available in a trade if Rodgers like retired or something, but the Packers weren't going to let Davante Adams just walk. So, I mean, he's the best receiver in the NFL. You can't just, I mean, he's 29 years old, but he's probably one of the 5 to 10 most valuable non-quarterbacks in the league. That might be a stretch just because of the age factor, but I mean, he's up there. He's one of the best players in the NFL. So you don't just let that guy walk in free agency. It's not like Chris Godwin, who's like a damn good receiver, but, you know, Davante Adams is like, you know. So that's all I have. Topical wise, I do have some mailbag questions to get through. So I do want to remind you this show is brought to you by my amazing supporters on Patreon. That is patreon.com/ThatFranchiseGuy, where you can not just support my platform, but you can get exclusive content. You'll be able to submit mailbag questions to the show here through my Patreon DMs. Just lead with mailbag questions, so I know that you're trying to submit a question for the show. You'll also get exclusive content. This is the time of year to sign up, man. It's earlier in the month, so it's not going to double charge you. We're going to be getting some more film breakdowns up once I get my draft board, which, by the way, you get access to my evaluations on every player in this draft, strengths, weaknesses, player comps, sortable categories, full combine results, you name it. You get access to that. But once I get 300 or 400 players done on there, I'm going to be doing a 7-round mock draft on every single team exclusively on Patreon. So the TFG Draft Insider Package, this is the time to sign up and support my show in the process. It's patreon.com/ThatFranchiseGuy. So we've got some questions here, not a ton of them. Our Ferg is just asking if this is where he submits mailbag questions. So yes, again, via DM on Patreon. Just lead with mailbag question. All right, from Bryce. After an impressive combine, has Abe Lucas moved into round 2 conversations? I think I slept on that Abe Lucas had a good combine. Let me pull up the combine. I totally kind of slept on that because there were some other headlines with the combine. I haven't because I finished all of my offensive tackle evals before the combine, so I haven't had time to go. I've started in on wide receivers, so I haven't had time to input all of the offensive line testing. So I think I haven't gotten to this yet. But let's see. Abe Lucas ran a 4.92. I mean, his testing numbers aren't all that impressive. 107-inch broad jump. 7.25 three cone's really 7.25 three cone and a 4.4 shuttle is really impressive. I think his foot speed kind of shows on film in his pass sets. But the 27-inch vertical, 107-inch broad jump, that kind of confirms to me where he's better moving backwards than he is moving forward. He's not like a guy that explodes out of his stance and is some dominant run blocker. I think the jumping stuff to me is a good indication of get off, which I don't think he has in the run game. We talk so much about get off for defensive linemen, but get off for offensive linemen is incredibly important to get leverage quickly and to generate pop off the snap. And Abraham Lucas doesn't really do that. I do like Lucas. I have him as, I think, a 3rd round prospect right now. Let's see. Pull this up. Pulling up the old Patreon draft board right here. Yeah, I have him as a 3rd to a 4th round prospect. B pass block finesse, B minus pass block power, but D plus run blocking. I don't think his combine changes a whole lot for me, no. He also came in 15 pounds lighter than he was listed at Washington State. He's listed at 330. Comes in at 315. So no, I don't think it moved him. I think it kind of confirmed how I feel about Abraham Lucas. From Nick, I saw your recent mock, and I think your argument for Ikem Ekwonu to the Lions is an interesting one. What would you think of them taking Hutch with the 2nd pick and landing Zion Johnson with the 32nd pick? Is it possible that the league isn't as high on Zion as you are and he slips to 32? I think it's definitely possible. I think the interior offensive line in this class is really poor. You've obviously got some top-heavy guys there. I think Zion, Linderbaum, and Kenyon Green are all really good prospects, but if you're taking Zion out of that equation, I think Alec Lindstrom and Dylan Parham are good, wide zone fits. Those guys can really get on the move and be those reach blockers for those Shanahan-style offenses. I think Darian Kennard and Cole Strange are decent day 2 prospects. Jamari Sawyer, Sean Ryan are fine, but I think if you want an interior offensive lineman, I think you got to take Zion in the 1st round. If you want a guy if you want a starter day 1 and you're not getting Kenyon Green or Tyler Linderbaum, I think Zion's the guy you got to take. It is certainly possible. He's smaller. We see it all the time. It's certainly possible they're there at 32. But I guess I'd be surprised, but not stunned if Zion was there at 32. But also, it's starting to look like Hutch isn't. I just will build upon that. It's starting to look like Hutchinson's not going to be there with the 2nd pick. It looks like the Jags are in on Hutch. So if Hutch isn't there, is Ikem Ekwonu not the pick for Detroit? I mean, it's either him or Hamilton. I don't see anyone trading up in that situation, right? It's starting to feel to me like the Ikem Ekwonu thing's going to happen. Dan Campbell's watching this guy's tape, who's just murdering people off the ball in the run game. Dan Campbell's sitting there with his, 10 shots of espresso in his coffee cup in his large carabiner. He's just like, oh yeah, Ikem Ekwonu, yes, oh, another pancake. Oh, this is how I want to start my morning. Kneecaps off. That's Dan Campbell watching Ikem Ekwonu. So I feel like that might be the pick. And that offensive line, like I said in my mock draft, God damn. Woo, that would get me fired up, man. Do it, Detroit. Do it. I want to see it. A lot of Lions fans loved it. A lot of Lions fans hated it. I think it's one of we'll see if it happens, but it's my favorite take so far of the draft season is Akem Ekwonu to Detroit, because I don't think I've ever seen that. Why did you give Kyle Hamilton's range a C+ grade? Personally, his range is one of his most defining attributes. Just look at the Florida State game and the Alabama game from last year. So I'm actually going to show you guys a clip on the podcast. I think I have this because I saw this question coming because everyone talks about his range, but there's a couple plays where he's lined up as a true free safety, and you can see like 4.59 speed, I think is about right for Kyle Hamilton. I don't think he's Derwin James speed. So let's see if I can find this real quick in my files, and I should be able to just drop it in here. Hopefully it's edited enough and it doesn't look like crap, but hang on. That's highlights. We gotta go here, Hamilton. Okay. I have 2 clips here that say meh speed. So let's watch these. So here he is at free safety. Here we go. This is the range clip. See, he's not really, I know that'd be a really freaking tough play, but just watch that one more time. He's up top at free safety. There's not a lot of range. Like, he's not, C+ range is still above average range, but I don't think you're going to put him, when I say range, I'm talking about lining up at true free safety like this play and being Jesse Bates, Earl Thomas. Like, that's not him. Like, for a 6'4", 220-pound guy, he can cover, but he's not like, he's not super rangy. Here's another one. I say meh speed. I think he's backside here and he's pursuing. Oh no, that's another kind of rangy type of play. Let's watch this again. Yeah. I mean, I think the rangy best free safeties make that play right there. So there's just a couple clips why he gets a C+ range for me and not great range. Now, one thing that you'll find in the notes there is that he makes up, when I grade range, I'm talking about those situations where just pure speed, acceleration, range. I do note that like his length makes up for about a half a step, which helps. But yeah, I wasn't wowed by Kyle Hamilton's true range. As a Chargers fan, this is from Edward Green, please give me hope and tell me how we can win the division next year. You can win the division next year. I mean, I think the Chargers have a chance to have a better roster than the Chiefs. And I think you have a chance that Justin Herbert is a better quarterback than Russell Wilson, which puts you right in the mix. The Chargers just have to have a good free agency. They got to get like a Sebastian Joseph Day. I mean, I did their whole dream offseason thing, so you can just go. That's your hope, is to have the offseason blueprint. But you can absolutely compete, man. The Broncos with Russ are going to be really good, but they're not unbeatable. And I don't think the Chiefs are unbeatable either. Especially if, like, I mean, how old is Kelsey at this point? I feel like Travis Kelce still balled out last year, but he's 32. He turns 33 in October. Like, I'm not saying he's going to drop off, but that's something you can hope for if you're a Chargers fan, is that he kind of declines a little bit. Chargers will be in the mix. They gotta have a good offseason though. Luke says, as a Seahawks fan, can you give me hope for the future? Like I said, there's worse places for a quarterback to go than a play-action heavy offense that pushes the ball downfield with DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and Noah Fant. I think getting Noah Fant was cool because you're getting like a real player, not just a pick. Maybe Dwayne Eskridge takes a step up if you trade Tyler Lockett. But it's tough. It's really tough to give you hope. You say, can I give you hope? And I don't know if I'm the guy that can. I don't know. we'll just have to see what they do with those draft picks, man. But it is tough. Matthew Bramble, another Seahawks question. After the Russell Wilson trade, Seahawks are obviously looking to draft a QB at 9. Should they be worried about another team trading up above them? And is Bobby Wagner next to go? So, yep, Bobby Wagner gone. I didn't talk about Bobby Wagner. He'll be a desirable free agent. My guess is he went straight to Pete Carroll and to John Schneider and was like, look, man, I can't do this. Can you release me? And it's just like JJ Watt. Like same deal. Like when you're a player that's that respected and you ask to be released and it doesn't murder your cap situation, it's a no-brainer. Like you got to pay your respects to Bobby Wagner. I'm speculating there, but that's just only what makes sense. As for drafting a quarterback at 9, see, I feel like that's interesting because as I mentioned, it is technically a spot where like a Malik Willis or a Matt Corral or a Sam Howell, any of those guys, it is technically a spot with that receiving core. Like that's a situation you want to put one of those raw quarterbacks in, where he can utilize that arm talent, have receivers make his job easier, a good scheme that simplifies things. Like that is the type of spot you want to put a quarterback in. So I wouldn't hate it. I wouldn't hate it as much as like the Panthers taking a quarterback that just have no setup for a guy like that. But I don't like these quarterbacks. I don't think you're going to be very good next year. Bryce Young looks really good. I know we said last year, although we didn't, we really kind of knew this upcoming quarterback class wasn't that good. So I'm not going to say that. I think it's fair to say next year's quarterback class looks better. Now you never know, like Spencer Ritter or Desmond Ritter, not Desmond Ritter. I struggle so much with Sam Howell, Desmond Ritter, and the Oklahoma kid that was supposed to be Rattler. Spencer Rattler. I get all those names mixed up, but Spencer Rattler was like maybe going to be the number 1 pick this year. He's not even on Oklahoma anymore. So Bryce Young's a much better prospect, but you just never know. You just never know where these guys are going to be. I mean, Sam Howell was also supposed to be like a number 1 pick. And a lot of people are saying he's a second rounder now. So you just never know what happens with these guys. But I don't know, man. I don't think the Seahawks are in a stable enough situation to use the main asset. Like that number 9 pick is the main juice of the trade. Really is. Because that Broncos pick, the first rounder next year is probably going to be in the 20s next year. So this is like your chance to get a true star player. I don't know exactly who that's going to be. Is it Sauce Gardner? Is it Derek Stingley? Is it Kayvon Thibodeau? Trayvon Walker? Like gamble on the upside there. Like if you take a quarterback that's just not very good, then in my opinion is a second round value, like Malik Willis or Howell or any of these guys really. You're just making the Russ trade even worse. Now, I understand the gamble on upside and the potential payoff is worth it, but your original question was, should they be worried about a team trading above them? God, no. You can't trade up for one of these quarterbacks. That'd be even worse. Now, in reality, it's possible. I think it's possible Atlanta takes Malik Willis at 8. There's a lot of hype for Malik Willis. My boy Austin Gale just said he thinks he goes number 2 to Detroit, and he's very tuned in. So, man, it's just crazy. It's crazy stuff. Draft is the time of year, man. Love it. Thank you, Patreon, for your great questions. That is today's show. I really appreciate you guys for listening. I'm going to be on Strong Opinions Sports in the next 48 hours. I'm recording with Zach tomorrow. It's going to be a fun conversation. And then over the weekend, I will be dropping our remaining Fix Your Team off-season blueprints. Might even get one up tomorrow. So you can keep an eye out for those remaining 3 divisions. Make sure you guys subscribe to the Fully Inflated Football Podcast on your audio platforms. Please do hit that like button, subscribe here on YouTube for more great draft content. Thank you for watching. I'm Marcus Whitman. We'll see you for the next one. Peace out.